Hello, this is BSJ, and this is going to be a rendition of a video that I've made in the past about hero difficulty. And this is going to be basically a recommendation for beginning carry players, for medium tier carry players, meaning you've been playing a little while, maybe a few hundred games, and then players like 5k and above, heroes and mechanics and things to be paying attention to from the carry role. So basically, in the past I made a video about easy heroes, like moderate heroes, and then like difficult heroes. What I want about this video is I want it to be black and white. Like I want it to be, beginners can be like, these are the heroes I'm going to play because I want to work on carry role. But this is something that the different approach that I want to take this time is basically establishing what I think makes a hero easier or more difficult to play. So the factors that I have listed for myself that make it, the difficulty of a hero is how good are they at escape mechanics, like how survivable are they when they're farming, when they're in team fights, etc. Heroes like Slark have multiple escape mechanics, while a hero like Luna has none. Ease of farm speed. On the other hand, you have a hero like Luna, where she just uses glaives and will farm very quickly. Or you could have a hero like PA. Without a Battle Fury, she does not have a way to flash farm. Or like a Weaver. That's what I mean by ease of farm speed. Variation in item builds. Some heroes like Anti-Mage, oftentimes Slark, those heroes have very cookie cutter builds. And I think that the more cookie cutter the builds are, the much easier it is to play a hero. And that means that the hero mainly has one purpose. Like different item builds mean you're usually serving a different purpose. So the heroes that have dry builds are much easier, in my opinion, to play and learn from. Solo kill potential. The more solo kill potential they have, especially for beginners, the easier the hero is to play. At lower levels, people are much worse at positioning, awareness around the map, and they'll die to solo kills. And heroes that require assistance in killing people, it's oftentimes more difficult to set up. You have to know the potential of the heroes on your team as well as the enemy team. There's more factors when it comes to looking for kills on heroes that don't offer solo kill potential. So I believe the more solo kill potential a hero has, generally the easier they are to play. Lane strength. Generally speaking, lane strength means that you can get away with making more mistakes, you can get away with less help, and basically you just have an advantage in regards to you have more room for error in the laning stage, such that your hero will still come online quickly, despite having not flawless mechanical execution in the laning stage. So generally the stronger they are in lane, the easier I consider them to be played. Next up is mechanical difficulty, something that most of you would probably put at the top of what decides if a hero is easy to play or not. I have it on this list because I do believe it matters, but I do not believe it is something that should be of utmost consideration. And I think that it really comes down to mechanical difficulty determining between moderate and difficult heroes. And it's just like any of the easy heroes, I wouldn't really list as what I think would be super mechanically difficult. And I think that's really straightforward for most players, what heroes are not mechanically difficult. Or as difficult, at least. And then meta strength. And what I mean by that is how good they are in the current patch. If a hero is better, it's just the same idea as lane strength, right? You have more room for error because the hero is just better in that current patch. So those are my factors. And so we're going to talk about tier 1 heroes. And what I mean by tier 1 are those are the easiest, in my opinion, heroes to learn from. They're heroes that oftentimes can have high levels of optimization. So a lot of these heroes can still apply to difficult tier, which would be tier 3. I have 3 tiers. But for tier 1, these are the heroes that if you're a starting player, I would recommend learning from. So I think if you look at Super Smash Bros. Brawl, you have Meta Knight on his own tier of characters in the game. And when I look at tier 1 carries, at least in the current patch based on balance, I believe Jug is on his own tier, Juggernaut. The reason why is he has solo kill potential with his Omni Slash. He has escape mechanic with spin TP or just spin in general. He generally farms very fast because of his low base attack time, and you sometimes build a Battle Fury. He can oftentimes get away with a very cookie cutter type item build. He is a pretty good laner with high kill potential, especially when he has help. He has mechanical things that are difficult about him, but it's mainly when to use spin and microing the healing ward. And microing healing ward is something that really only pays off at the super high levels, and something you can get away with being bad at when you're first starting off as a carry player. And then obviously in the meta strength, he's just a strong hero. So I think that he's if I had to say one hero for anyone to start off with, it would be Juggernaut. And that's for all the reasons I listed above. So other heroes to consider, and I'll explain why for each hero. Lifestealer, because he's a strong laner and has innate regen sustain, so that makes his farming more straightforward, as well as the fact that he's very survivable with his rage and infest, so it makes it so you can get out of a lot of sticky spots, and he's just a high damage output right clicker, so he's not all that mechanically difficult. A hero like Slark, who I do believe has high levels of optimization, and there's a lot of room for error, meaning that it's really hard to play Slark perfectly, but it's one of those things that a lot of people can play Slark decently. And that's why I think it makes him such a good hero in the lower levels, makes you understand solo kill potential. He's a good hero for learning how to scout out wards, for getting pickoffs, and overall he's just a hero that you can get away with a lot because of all of his this game mechanics. Wraith King, just a very easy to execute hero, innate sustain with his lifesteal, and as well as the fact that his item builds can be pretty straightforward, and his lane strength is also pretty decent. Another hero is Phantom Assassin, something I see a lot in the lower tiers, and it's a decent hero to start with. The hesitations that I have with a hero like Phantom Assassin or Wraith King compared to heroes like I already listed is that their farm speed is much slower. Unless you build Battle Fury, those heroes just don't farm nearly as fast. So when it comes to playing a hero like Phantom Assassin, even though she's mechanically rather simple when it comes down to like team fighting, all you have is 2 buttons, right? She's a hero that doesn't get items unless like very optimized like the farming patterns and like making use of your abilities to the maximum. She just doesn't get that much farm. Like it's much easier to farm rapidly with Luna than it is with Phantom Assassin. But at the same time, Phantom Assassin is very survivable with her blur as well as her blink strike to get away. So my last hero on this list is Luna. I'm not excluding any heroes that I have not listed on this list from being starting heroes. You know, heroes that I would also consider are stuff like Weaver, Anti-Mage, Ursa, because Ursa is like very straightforward mechanically. But the last hero I listed is Luna, and the reason why she's on this list, but she's like partially a tier 2, is because she just does not have a survivability mechanic. So heroes like that really require you to have stronger map awareness, you know, be aware when you have to group up with your team, and make it so that, you know, you have to make sure that you're like gauging threats is like a huge part of farming as a carry. And when you're playing like Juggernaut, Lifestealer, or Slark, oftentimes it takes multiple heroes or very specific heroes to kill you. And a lot of times as like a Luna, like any combination of 2 enemy heroes can pick you off in the early to mid game. So that makes it so you have to be concerned about a lot more factors. And that will slow down your farm, it'll make you play worse when you're concerned with these kind of things. And it's something where one of the biggest parts at starting off as a carry is being able, after the laning stage, to be able to farm and think about who threatens you and gauging that. And if you're starting with Lifestealer, Juggernaut, it's like really simple to be like, okay, what stuns do they have through BKB to stop me from like rage TPing or spin TPing, and what heroes do they have that can silence me so I can't get my spin or rage off. And that's like really easy to determine. With a Luna, you have to think about, you know, what heroes do enough damage and like can I run away from, and what's my positioning because I'm fast but like I don't have any survivability mechanics. So it's just one of those things where I would highly recommend starting there in the tier 1 list, and then once you have that part of your game, you know, worked on, and you think you can play heroes that are more difficult in regards to their ability to split push and solo kill, then heroes with ease of farm speed like Luna, but not necessarily survivability mechanics, are a great way to like go through the flow chart of your tier 1 easiest heroes. So moving on to tier 2, generally speaking, you know, tier 1 heroes have almost all the features, if not at least half of them, that I listed on my determination of difficulty of a carry. Modern heroes will have like half or less of these mechanics. And so some of these heroes are Weaver, Terrorblade. I put Anti-Mage in tier 2, but he could be arguably tier 1. Ursa, same thing. Clinks, Spectre, Huskar, Phantom Lancer, Gyrocopter, Vengeful Spirit, Ember Spirit, and Drow Ranger. So if you look at all these heroes, you know, just to give you a quick rundown, I'm not going to go through all of them in depth, but a hero like Weaver, no flash farming mechanics, but he has survivability mechanics, and he's a hero that is very hard to kill, so you can get away with a lot of like missed positions, but at the same time, he's like a hero that doesn't straightforwardly solo carry the game, and he doesn't oftentimes offer solo kill potential. There's just that level of difficulty in regards to what items to build, as well as how to play the game properly. Do I rotate to take towers? Do I split push a lot? Do I join fights? That kind of thing. A hero like Terrorblade Has a long cooldown ability that makes him fight or not in the Metamorphosis, similar to a hero like Faceless Void, who I'd also place in the moderate tier, because they both have survivability mechanics, Void having Time Walk, and Terrorblade just having illusions that can push for him. But at the same time, they do have that bit of long cooldown and micro for Terrorblade, and the decision making for Void. They're just less straightforward carries, but at the same time, I would deem them in the easier realm of moderate, because Terrorblade can solo carry games very well as long as he gets farm. So rather than having to worry as much about rotating properly and usage of Metamorphosis early, a lot of times it's just like how fast can you farm, and if you get there, you'll win, at least in the lower tiers. So for a hero like Anti-Mage, same thing. If you don't come online fast enough, then you're just going to lose the game on a hero like that. So he has low room for error in terms of farming speed, but if you're good at farming, then he's a rather straightforward hero. Ursa is a hero that mechanically is easy and has a survivability mechanic, but I don't think he's amazingly strong in this meta, and he also doesn't have an easy way to farm up items, as well as I believe there's a lot of variation in his item builds. Same thing, Clinks, a lot of variation in his item builds, at least past the first or second item, and he's a hero that is not that great at split pushing, more of like a pick-off tower taker, and that's like a less straightforward way to play the game. Same thing with heroes like Huskar, PL. All these heroes are very like niche heroes, and that makes them so they get to understand their specific purpose. And even though they may not be mechanically all that difficult, stuff like armlet toggling can even make Huskar like a tier 2 moderate, as well as the fact that he, heavily relies on timings. Something I didn't mention in my mechanical difficulty that I do believe is, what are their timings? Some heroes just have, they scale into the late game, and all you need to do is get there. But other heroes like Huskar have very specific timing windows based around objectives, such as Roshan, and that makes playing those heroes slightly more difficult. So tier 3 difficult, when I talk about the most difficult heroes in the game, I look at Morphling. He has ways to get out and decent way of farming, but he's like a weak laner and very susceptible to having the enemy team group up, and he's got a lot of mechanical difficulties within his innate abilities. A hero like Naga, even though she's a rather straightforward split pusher, there's a ton of room for optimization, and she has a big ultimate, a Song of the Siren, that requires you to really have the proper decision making and coordination with your team. Another hero that I'd place in this list is something like a Razor, something like a Lone Druid, and what I mean by that is Lone Druid did get weaker, but I look at these kind of heroes and I think to myself, like, they're mechanically difficult, in my opinion, with the Lone Druid, and then a hero like Razor is just very not straightforward on how to win the game. Like, usually they have a very specific purpose, they counter a very specific hero, and they require a very specific playstyle. So heroes in the tier 1, such as like Jug, Lifesteal, and Slark, these heroes can be played for, just because you're an advanced carry player doesn't mean these heroes can't be played, thinking like they're too easy for you. My point that I look at with the tier 3 difficult heroes are the fact that their win condition and their use of their abilities are not straightforward. Morphling has a ton of ways of getting out, but at the same time, like making sure your replicate's in the right place at the right time, making sure your mana usage is like moderated really well. A hero like Naga, making sure you don't take too much of your team's farm, making sure you take the dangerous proper farm. And then a hero like Razor, making sure you build the correct items. His item builds can be all over the place. And it may seem like, wow, like what an easy mechanical hero. I agree, Razor mechanically seems relatively easy, but in the conceptual approach to the game, I believe that hero is very difficult. I've excluded heroes like Meepo and like Medusa because of the fact that those are primarily mid heroes, at least in the upper tiers, and I believe that, you should model most of your play around higher tier players, even for like 5k players. I believe that, I don't want to take away from creativity, but if pros don't think it's good, the 99% of the time, it's probably not good. If no pro team puts Medusa in the safe lane, the odds are there's a reason why they're all putting her mid lane. Maybe pros will be wrong every once in a while, and that has occurred, but for the sake of like practicing and getting better at carry, I believe that you really should just focus on, seeing what's good in the meta based on what pros are doing and learning their builds. So it's one of those things where if you're like a tier 1 carry, I want you to do cookie cutter builds on straightforward heroes on how they execute and be able to learn your timings and like playstyle based on these very simple guidelines. And then once you get to tier 2, think about positioning heroes, think about working on one thing at a time. One of these categories that I listed for difficulty, working on, a hero that's weak in lane, seeing how you can make up for that, working on heroes that have weak escape mechanics and working on your map awareness, ease of farm speed, working on heroes like that they don't farm very fast. So what items you build are very important, as well as like how you use them and how you apply yourself on the map. Variation in item builds, making sure like on heroes like Razor and all the heroes that I listed that have situational item builds that you're able to apply specifically every game. Like, what is my purpose this game? What items do I need to build and why? And with a hero like Anti-Mage, I'm going to go Treads, Battle Fury, Manta, Basher, Abyssal, like 90% or more of my games. So even though he's got a very cookie cutter item build, a hero such as Ursa, I don't believe has a very cookie cutter item build. Almost every hero has a build that's like a go-to, meaning you can build it almost every game and it'll be okay. And so the point of being like a tier 3 difficult carry and working on heroes, even if they're tier 1 on my difficulty list, is to really refine them, optimize them, take them to the next level. Like, make sure your starting items are very refined per game, situationally correct, making sure your item build up, meaning Treads before Aquila or Aquila before Treads, Iron Talon or just a Cooling Blade, all these little factors are just honed in and really ironed out. And that's what I believe it takes to be like the next level of a carry. So when I look at these heroes on this tier list, I really want you to pay attention mainly to these factors. I'm going to repeat them one last time. Escape mechanic, ease of farm speed, variation in item builds, solo kill potential, lane strength, mechanical difficulty, and how strong that hero is in the meta. And these are the kind of things that, like, if you're wanting to learn a new hero, one thing I look at is meta strength. It's like, if I don't know how to play Juggernaut and he's strong in the meta, that's a great time to learn because you'll have more room for error because that hero is just innately stronger. But if I'm wanting to learn a new hero and that hero is also simultaneously at the same time very weak in the meta, that's going to make it like really hard to learn that hero because you're working from behind. If I'm a player that's played 150 games of Phantom Lancer, even if that hero is a little bit weak in the meta, I've played enough Phantom Lancer that I'm confident that I can have a large impact on the game and still learn about the hero and optimizing him, even though he may not be the top tier of carries in this patch. So it's something to really consider, each one of these factors, and something like how it affects what you want to learn. Do I want to learn more about applying pressure and solo kill potential? Do I want to learn about optimizing my item choices? Do I want to learn about how to like farm rapidly on my heroes that don't have innate farm mechanics and then like turning that into timings? Do I want to just work on mechanical difficulty, microing heroes, all this kind of stuff? And it's really just looking at these factors and determining what tier of carry you are and what you want to work with. And that's what I believe is the best approach for approaching the carry role from the beginning all the way up until the end. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and are able to apply these concepts. And if you have any questions, I'd really like to hear them from you guys about ways I can elaborate on the content of this video. And I hope you check out my other guides on Gamely.